The Kiva podcast is now coming to you from our South Hill podcast studios, with your host behind the mic, William Lee. And now here he is.
Welcome, everybody, to Kiva Live. I'm your host, William Lee, podcaster, podcast publisher, producer, and the co-founder of the Disruptors Podcast Network. What in the world is going on in our public schools? For years now, we have heard of one violent act after another. Throughout the United States, students have brought guns to school, shot and killed administrators, teachers, and other students in a horrible trauma act of violence. What's going on with these kids? Psychologists say that it's bullying, and it's an act of not being accepted when they go into schools, or if they leave one school and go into, for instance, a high school setting. Things are changing, and that change causes a disruption in your child's mental attitude towards others. Is it the teachers? Is it the change in environment? Is it the anger that bullying has caused throughout children's time in schools? What is it that puts a gun in the hand of a student, a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old, who comes to school with the intent of shooting somebody, getting even? I've had it. Those guys have bullied me enough. I'm going to kill them. This is the type of attitude that's been showing up more and more as these individuals have been arrested and checked for mental abilities. They have been through research programs while they're incarcerated. This is a troublesome time. I am so glad that my kids are grown up now and adults, but I fear for my grandchildren, for the neighbors' children that I see walking down the streets after getting off of a school bus. You kind of wonder what's going on in their mind. How are they doing? Is everything, shall we say, safe in their schools? You know, it's pretty scary, as I've said in other podcasts, when you get to the point where arriving in a school, you feel like you're going into an institution of criminals. The locks on the doors, the all-around environment of containment, people asking you questions, why are you there? You almost feel like your kids are being taken away from you and held as hostages for 8 hours a day. And at the term of the, shall we say, hostage environment, you drive into a parking lot and your child is delivered back to you by a friendly teacher who says, "Oh, have a nice day." It's great to be able to fight the pandemic. It's great to be able to keep children safe. But what's happening right now is that children are fearing. They're fearing going to school. They're fearing that they might be hurt. Bullying is at an all-time high. What are the teachers doing? What are the administrators doing? And how can the schools clean up this, I call, virus of really mental anguish? And that's what it's all about. We're so afraid of the pandemic, and we have pushed so much on the media that children need to be vaccinated, children need to have masks on, children need to be 6 feet apart. Very true. There are many wonderful things that have happened to children to save them from the virus by following simple rules and regulations. But we have spent the last 2 years in this state harping on these violations, if it is not mask on outside or inside the building, and other behavioral problems which could or could not cause the virus to spread. We don't know. But one factor we do know, violence on school campuses is growing. Just recently at the Bethel School District High School, there was a horrendous beating of an individual who is autistic in the boys' room. Now, one of the students immediately took out his cell phone and took a video of what was going on, and it ended up on television. This is a moment where parents and students alike were absolutely obsessed with the idea this could happen. They walked out. The students did. They walked out of class and protested and demanded that the administration the teachers, the superintendent, and all the rest that are to run our school system safely be accounted for this particular activity and bit of violence. There is no call for violence in our schools. Never has been and never shall be. However, these type of violent acts occur all the time. Sexual harassment, violence from fist fighting, guns in school, and the list goes on. It's a pretty tough job to get an education nowadays, unless, of course, you keep your child at home and school becomes a homeschool event. Education right now, as the new test came out, because of the virus situation, because of the students going to remote learning, whereas in many cases the parents weren't around when the children were supposed to be at school on their computers, and that's simply because mom and dad both had to work, or there was some sort of a situation where there's only one parent involved who was not able to be right with the young man or the young lady and make sure that she turned on her laptop and followed the school instructions. There was a lot of loopholes, and I'm sure the state superintendent of schools, after this last, I call it remote era of non-learning occurred, knows that we can't continue on with that particular style. Things just didn't really come together. But what are we going to do now when we put the students back in school? The virus is getting better. They're using a different approach towards keeping our kids safe from the violence. Or are they? Or are they just trying, because they're so overwhelmed with all the different changes in the abilities to police these activities, and try to find some ground of resemblance of a normal school and educational process is dwindling. Now, we have teachers that naturally, unfortunately, have decided that their personal rights to the vaccine question is being pushed under the table, and they're being forced into making a decision that they do not believe in. Those teachers naturally have walked off the job or been put off the job. We have substitute teachers which have come on board under the same, I would call it, curtain of non-vaxxation that has caused them to say we have the right to what we put into our bodies, and there again have been replaced or denied the right to employment at the schools. Now, this argument's been going on for some time. Well, we get all the teachers vaccinated. We think we have enough personnel to run the schools, but really, in some cases, they're still short good teachers. And this is opening the door for students to carry on in violent activities, those that wish to do so. Here's when we, the parents, we, the taxpayers, we, the citizens of the areas in the school districts, need to stand up and say, hey, we want accountability in the school system. We want our children safe. We want our children educated. We want our children to have the best possible teachers that they can have. There's a lot of extremely gifted teachers that give their life of learning, success, and really put their job first to educate our kids. In some cases, they become the kids' heroes. And it's a wonderful feeling for a child to have an opportunity to be educated by someone that they really look up to. But what are we doing now? Well, let's take a look at it. We've got lockdowns. We've got kids coming to school with guns. But most of all, we have good teachers and administrators that are fighting a very endless battle with nobody watching their back, trying to make school a safe learning place for your children to be. Now, a lot of administrators in different schools are coming under fire, and some of them should. I'm sure that I could look up online and find cases where administrators, school teachers who have taken sexual advancements on their students. I'm sure I can find students that have taken advantage of teachers in different opportune ways of violence. I'm sure that I can find schools that are underfunded and have problems because of underfunding and not being able to control the student body. I'm sure we could find all of this and more. But what we have to do now that it's hitting so close in the school districts, in our homes, in our communities, we have to stand up and say, okay, what are you going to do and how can we help you accomplish safety in our schools? And until we take this measure, until we get to the point where we take a strong hold of our educational process for our kids, things are going to get worse. Now, every time I turn around, I always see a school levy. Oh, we need more money to build bigger and better schools. I always see a maintenance levy. Oh, we have to maintain our schools and make them safer for those students. These schools are old and antiquated. Maybe the ventilation system isn't up to snuff. Hey, I'm all in favor of making sure money's available for these projects. The state of Washington has the marijuana tax, which some of that money was to go to education. We aren't sure where it went, but we know it just disappeared. How about the lottery? Back in 1980, I can remember all the speeches that were given by the politicians to let's put a lottery in effect in the state. It'll wipe out teachers' problems, schools, levies for funding problems because the state will have extra money to put into these programs for better education. That too turned out to be shall we say, just a misunderstanding by the voters, I'm sure. But the politicians' pockets grow fatter. Not all politicians take my wonderful optimism about them, I'm sure. And I'm sure they're, like everybody else in America, good opportunities for good people to become politicians. And there's opportunity for those systems that have broken down to continue to suck up cash. Where does this leave the schools? It's simple. It leaves them in a gray area where they have to fight for every dime and every dollar. But that's not the whole problem here. The whole problem is the system is deteriorating. We need to start at the superintendent of schools' office, sit him down and say, hey, look what is going to happen if we chop off your tax funds? What is going to happen if we start boycotting your meetings? What is going to happen if we start boycotting schools? And what is going to happen if the teachers in these different schools join our side to protest what you are doing as far as not keeping our kids educated, safe, and most of all, in a friendly environment that we are paying for? This is ridiculous. You are our employees, and I'll bet you I've said that to about elected officials in about every podcast I've done for the last 6 years. Nobody seems to hear me at times, but let me tell you something. They are our employees. What is our great senators doing for education and helping us fight these problems and coming down on the level of where we need them? Not in Washington, D.C., not keeping track of commerce, not keeping track of what's going on in the Senate. Let's get them to keep track down here in our communities where we voted them in office to work for us. They're not doing it. I'm telling you that right now. Now, if I'm wrong, and if Canwell or if Patty Murray hear this and are disgusted with my attitude, I'd like them to email me at KEEBA, K-E-E-B-A agency, @gmail.com and let me know what I'm saying that is wrong and tell me what you are doing. I'm always interested in being educated, and if I'm wrong, I'll admit it on the air. But what I see right now is not what we should be seeing. Schools need help. Come on, senators. Come on, governor. Come on, legislators. Jump in here. We need help. We need to stop the violence. We need to build better educational programs, and we need to do it now and protect our children. This has been my views, no views of anybody else that works with me at the agency.